Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Bible Vibes. I'm your host, Jeremy Jackson, and today I'm going to get out of the book of Enoch and I want to do a little bit of topical stuff. I'm probably going to do a couple of book teachings, but today I want to talk about trials and temptation. Ooh. And I think this is something that I know every human, but especially Christians, kind of struggle with, man, because we go through both. We go through trials and we also go through moments of temptation. And I know for me, because of my background, I came out of addiction. I've been clean almost 8 years now, thank God. But trials and temptation, mainly the temptation, I have dealt with a lot after getting clean. I don't believe the temptation really ever leaves. I think it's more of how do I respond to that temptation when a trial comes, because if you really think about it, trials and temptations are different things. A trial is a trial, where temptation is definitely on a different scale. But I think how we handle that really shows where we are spiritually speaking. If you're a Christian, it goes to a lot of different places in your life. And so today I just want to talk about those two things, just kind of a topical discussion. This video is probably going to be short. I'm averaging 1 hour videos, and I kind of need to step back a little bit because I truthfully, I understand not everybody has an hour to just dedicate, out of their day, because we have lives, we have children, we have work, we have family, we have, all the things that life throw at us. And I know for me personally, work takes up a lot of my time, and then family comes, right in there with the same amount of time. So I kind of want to do a couple of little short ones, just some short episodes. That way, when you got 20 or 30 minutes, you can just check in. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do. I would appreciate it. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. And we're going to go to the Bible, my favorite place to go. And when we talk about trials and temptations, I think the place to go is this book right here, James. And James has a lot to say about the individual, not the church, but the individual Christian. When I read this book, it's like a big slap in the face, because there's a lot of times I read this book and I'm like, man, this dude is like, he's really just shooting at me right now. Man down. You know what I mean? Like, just hitting me. And I think when I read the book of James, it's more of a reflection of myself and the things I go through. James says some really hard things. I'm not doing a teaching on the book of James right now. I just want to talk about trials and temptation. So let's just read a little bit, probably 1 through 15. Chapter 1, verse 1, James, a bondservant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes who are dispersed abroad, greetings. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. But if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But he must ask in faith without any doubting, for the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. Verse 7. For that man ought not expect that he will receive anything from the Lord, being a double-minded man, unstable in all of his ways. But the brother of humble circumstances is to glory in his high position. Verse 10. And the rich man is to glory in his humiliation, because like flowering grass he will pass away. For the sun rises with a scorching wind and withers the grass, and its flower falls off, and the beauty of its appearance is destroyed. So too the rich man in the midst of his pursuits will also fade away. Verse 12. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, for once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him. This is where I want to be right here, 13, 14, and 15. You can see I've kind of highlighted it. So 13 says, let no one say when he is tempted that I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then when lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. Now, there is a lot we can kind of unpack right here, okay? This particular passage comes after a portion of scripture where James is informing us, actually, the whole book informs us, but it informs us that God leads us into trials in order to develop us. And that sounds so crazy, but when we get down to the brass tacks and the nuts and bolts and all the stuff that goes along with Christianity, trials are the only way that we can actually see whether we have developed or not. Because I know personally, there's been a lot of times where in my walk, I'm just like, am I further along now than when I started? Because see, as an individual, you don't get to see all of the fruit that you've actually produced since day one, because, you know, you go through life and you do your everyday things, and, you know, you don't really get a chance to see the change that is really taking place as much as those around you can physically hear and see the change that has gone on within you, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically. You don't really, I know I don't really sit back and just take an hour out of my day to reflect on how far I've actually come. And James is leading us into this idea that trials are meant to develop us, right? So the Greek word for trials is also translated into the same Greek word for temptation, but the problem is there's actually a difference. Now, there's a difference between a trial and a temptation, okay? A trial is something created or either something that is allowed by God to produce spiritual development, and that kind of goes alongside of spiritual growth. So a temptation is actually an enticement to do evil. Like you're enticed to do something counter to what God actually has asked us, right? Or in other words, it's an invitation to rebel or to be disobedient to God and what God has said in his word. So in order to interrupt or disrupt our spiritual growth, temptation comes, and what we do with that temptation actually either allows us to bring glory to God or to bring shame upon ourselves, right? And a trial is actually meant to develop you. So there is a difference. You know, a trial is helped to develop us, and a temptation is actually just an enticement for us to just go out and do something contrary to what God has asked of us, right? So a trial is meant to develop you, where the temptation is actually meant to defeat you or either to destroy you. Because remember, you know, the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. So the temptation, its ultimate reward or its ultimate prize is to destroy you. He would much rather destroy you than to just defeat you. Now, people who come out of addiction and they have changed their lives around, you know, thanks to Holy Spirit and the things that God have done for us, we know, or we should know, that we cannot afford to go back, or we cannot afford to act on these temptations, especially with fentanyl being rampant all across the world right now. Because if we were to go back, that one temptation and acting on that temptation could be the last time that we are on this earth. It is literally meant to destroy you, temptation. And so we cannot act on those temptations, because ultimately the devil, the enemy, Satan, whatever you want to call him, his goal is to take you completely out of this world. Okay. Now, that's a thing that I have to try to remember every single day as I'm just going through my life, man, because, I don't ever really think that the urge or the temptation to use or go and do what I used to do is ever going to leave me. There's moments in time, like long spans, where I go and, I don't even think about it. It never even crosses my mind. But then there are those times where just randomly, man, my mind starts trying to lock in on, hey, you could. And I'm like, nah, I can't, not going to, and people who have come out of addiction, we're the lucky ones. I've had a lot of people, a lot of friends, good people that I loved, that just are not with me anymore. And so temptation is that place in your life where you actually have a choice yourself to decide life or death. And that's just being brutally honest with you. So just remember, a trial is meant to develop you. It's meant to help you grow and just continue on, where a temptation is meant to destroy you. So these two words actually go hand in hand a lot of times. And as we think of good and evil, those are the two things that come up: trials and temptation. Now, in the garden, Genesis, chapters 1, 2, and 3, God planted a tree and he told Adam, look, you can eat from whatever you want. Everything is here, but there's two trees. This tree right here, though, in the middle, I don't want you to eat from it, because in that day you will surely die. And that was his trial. That was their trial. Okay. And I want to make the differential, or the difference between trial and temptation, because that was the trial. God said, you can eat of everything here, but this tree, the day that you eat from it, you will surely die. So that was Adam and Eve's trial. Now, the enemy came and he took that trial as an opportunity to introduce temptation. So God told Satan that he could test Job in the book of Job, right? So God sent Satan as a trial, and Satan used that opportunity of getting access to that trial. He actually took that as an opportunity to introduce temptation. Now, temptation is different in its entire source as well as its outcome. Now, when you're tempted to do evil, the source is not from God. When you are tempted or come into temptation to do something evil, that source is not from God. Now, God does not send temptation, but he will always allow the trial. Okay, from that trial, we either birth sin that leads to death, or we move further on in our spiritual growth in order to glorify God. Okay, now temptation is a progression that leads to sin. All right. Temptation is it's like an inward desire, okay, and it's a desire for a thing, whether it be a person, place, or thing. A desire is just inside of you, and it says, I want whatever this is, right? But desire for a thing is oftentimes mixed with deception. And once those two things are mixed together, it always leads to disobedience. Okay. Now, it's not a sin to be tempted. Okay. Because temptations come. When temptations come, the temptation itself is not sin. Okay. Temptation becomes sin the moment that you decide you are going to respond or to react to the thing that has tempted you and go after it. At that point is when it becomes sin. Now, just to be tempted is not sin, because temptation comes all the time. But how you respond to it is actually what becomes sin, as the Bible refers to it. So the fact that, temptation shows up in your day to day. I mean, let's be honest, man. We're all tempted by lots of different things: the money, the house, the cars, the clothes, the women or men or whatever. Like temptation is always there. It's always available. You know, but that does not necessarily mean that because you are tempted that you have sinned. It's the way you respond to it. So just because temptation shows up, your response to it actually is what determines the outcome of what the Bible calls obedience or disobedience. Now, sin has an advertised price that's always lower than the actual cost. I used to have a friend, I still have a friend named, we called him Mule or Mark, but he used to say sin will take you further than you wanted to go, and it'll keep you longer than what you wanted to stay. You know, sin has a lower price or a lower price tag, but the cost is actually way higher than the advertised price. Now, sin in itself has the power to reproduce itself. And if we go back and we read James, let's do that real quick so I can kind of just show you this. I'm over in here, Hebrews. Let's go right here. But 13. Let no one say when he is tempted that I'm being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone, but each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then, right here, when lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. Okay? So sin has the ability to reproduce itself because sin is a birth giver. Okay? Giving birth is part of the reproduction of humanity. And James is literally saying, look, sin can reproduce itself because it gives birth to death. Now, we all have our own kids named sin. Your sin may be different than mine. We all have a certain level of things that we still deal with, and we're going to continue to deal with until the day that we go home. Okay? The reason is because we have not yet received our glorified bodies. We live in this body of sin. Okay? But sin can bring forth death. Now, I want to switch over and I want to go look at something in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Let me get up here. 1 Corinthians 10 and 13 right here. Okay. So in 1 Corinthians 10:13, it says, no temptation has overtaken you, but such as is common to man. And God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will provide the way of escape as well, so that you will be able to endure it. Now, if God allows temptation to come to you, then he himself has already determined that it is something that you can handle. Not only that, but he's also provided an additional door of escape for you. And that's great news, man. Because anytime that temptation comes, always know there is a door of escape or an exit door for you already prepared that you can just flee the scene, you know? So you got to assume by faith that anything that comes your way to form temptation, that you can handle it. You are able to overcome it, and you are able to look around and find the exit. And I'm so glad God has thought all of this out for me, because I don't always use 100% of my brain, if you know what I'm saying. So the same time that the trials come, the temptation comes almost immediately or shortly after, but the exit is always ready and it's always available. Okay. The issue a lot of times that I've kind of noticed in myself is that I get so caught up in the temptation itself, like whatever the thing is that's the temptation, I get caught up in the thing itself and I'll focus on the temptation so much that I can't even look around for the exit sign. Because I'm fixated on the thing. Remember, in the garden, it said that Eve looked at the fruit and desired it. Okay. She was fixated on the fruit. She was so fixed on that thing that she couldn't see that there was an opportunity for her to exit the situation. And I know for me, it's a similar way. Like if I get so hung up on the temptation and I'm locked in and I'm focused and, a lot of times I'm oblivious to the fact that there is even an exit. And so the enemy loves to get you into something, especially anything that is going to exclude God from it. Okay. God does not interact in certain things. He can't because of his holiness. Okay. And he loves for you to go to church. The enemy loves for you to go to church with God, but then leave him at the exit door when you're coming out of the joint. He loves when you come to church. Believe me, the enemy loves when you show up at church and you just leave God at the door when you exit, right? Because he knows you're not going to do anything during the week, because now he can just throw all these temptations at you because you've left the presence of God that you had in the church for that 1 hour session. You've left him at the door and left the presence inside the church or the chapel or whatever you want to call it. And now, because you've decided to do so, you no longer carry or host the presence of God. Now you're just open and vulnerable to any temptation that comes your way. And the enemy loves that. That is his goal, for you to just leave and leave the presence wherever it's at and exclude God from whatever your life is going to be, rolling forward in this week. So our inbred selfishness is the breeding ground for sin. Our own desires, our own lusts, and all those things, like that is the breeding ground for sin. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to flip back over here to James real quick. Not Hebrews. We don't want to be in Hebrews right now. James chapter 1. Okay. So let no one say when he's tempted, he's being tempted by God. Okay. For God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone. God does not do the tempting. Okay. He sends the trials, but the temptation comes always 100% from the evil one. Okay. But 14 is where I was trying to go. Each person is tempted when he himself is carried away and enticed by his own lust. It's your own lust that carries you away. When the temptation comes, you like that thing, right? And so it's kind of it's kind of the flip of a coin, right? Some things are more tempting than others. Some things are easy to say, no, I'm good. While other things, they appeal to your five senses. Oh, it looks so good, man. Look at all that money. I could just do this and I could do that. All of that stuff is stemming from a place called I, me, I. Now, ourself, and everything selfish about us is where Satan can actually breed sin, and that sin can produce death. Now, I have another verse or a couple verses over in Romans that I want to go to. We're going to go Romans chapter 7 real quick. Okay. Put James up. We'll put Corinthians up. And we'll go to Romans chapter 7. Okay. And we're going to look at verses 22 and 23. For I joyfully concur with the law of God in my inner man, but I see a different law in the members of my body, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin which is in my members. Now that is a crazy verse, dude. That is an insane way to look at this man's life. For I joyfully concur. I really agree with the law of God in my inner man. But here's the issue, bro. This is what I love about Paul. He's being real. I see a different law in the members of my body, because that law is waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin, which is in this thing that I wear. This old wretched man that I am. Who will set me free from this body of death? That's crazy, dude. Because he's acknowledging the fact that there is a war going on within himself. And when we think of war, when we read in the Bible about war, we kind of read it in a fluffy way, not realizing that as war goes on, there is always one result. That one result is often death. So this is a Christian struggling, and he's saying that this is a war. I got stuff that I know I shouldn't do, that I know deep down that I do not want to do, but I do it anyways. Have you ever felt that way? If not, you ain't saved. I'll just be real with you. If you haven't felt that, I'm not sure that you're saved. And I'm not the judge. That's up for you to decide. But if there is not an acknowledgement of this inner turmoil, this inner war that is going on inside of you at all times as a result of temptation and your own lust and your flesh and your own desires, right? You may need to go back to the beginning and actually really look at, am I really saved? Because I'll be honest with you, before I got saved, there was no war. I just went and did. And that was my life. I just did whatever I wanted, however I wanted, whenever I wanted to do it. But then the moment that I encountered God and I became a saved person, there was a struggle going on inside of me because I wanted to do good, but I could not do it. I wanted to do the law of God and the commandments and love my neighbor as I love myself, but I could not do it. Previously, before Christ, I had just no idea there was even a war going on. But then, I get to a place in my life where I start to realize, man, like every day I'm fighting for my life inside. I battle depression, anxiety. I struggle with thoughts of addiction, lust, all the things. Like, you're not really even consciously aware of any of those things being what we regard as wrong until the moment that you get saved. And those things are just going to continue on and carry on all the way until the day that you exit this place that we call earth. Now, the reason why I would beg to say that if you don't feel that way, you're probably not saved, is because that actually means that you don't have anything in you to fight. It means you're perfect. That means you're literally 5 pounds, 7 ounce, sweet baby Jesus reincarnated, and you live over in High Point or wherever you live. Like, if there's not a war going on inside of you, that means you're perfect. It also means you're lying. Not to be that guy, but nobody is perfect, man. We're going to struggle with this idea of temptation and sin all of our days until he either comes back or we leave. Because this thing that we live in, this earth suit, as one of my friends Fawaz likes to call it, this thing has been tainted by sin. It just harbors all of these desires. And our goal is to overcome this earth suit and live by the Spirit. Now, the flesh is the thing that craves to do the things that are independent of God, his presence, and his Spirit. So hopefully today, man, hopefully I gave you a little bit that you can think about. For me, I'm always, like, my mind is always just going. And I'm thinking about, lots of things because I overthink, I overanalyze, I do a lot of reading and self-reflection, and not to the point where, I'm full of myself or whatever, because I'm not perfect by any means. I have a lot of stuff that I still need to work on, but thank God I'm not the man that I used to be, right? So just do a little reading, man. I really try to encourage you guys to read as often as I can, because I know how hard it is to get in the book all the time. So anyway, just a little short episode for you guys, man. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, share it with your friends, share it on your social media. I'm going to continue to post episodes. I'm going to do some topical stuff, and I'm going to continue with my book studies. But really do hope you guys have a great Easter weekend. Love you guys, and we'll catch you next time.